Young boy gave his blanket to a dying Indian girl. 700 warriors lined up outside his barn. The frost had melted since dawn, and the sky stayed low all day, pressing like a hand over the prairie. Liam Carter, thin for 14 and quieter than most, stepped down from the porch without a coat, the porch boards moaning underfoot. His breath fogged and vanished as soon as it left his mouth. In his arms, he carried the patchwork blanket stitched by his grandmother, a worn, sun-faded thing with one corner torn where the dog had chewed. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. The barn sat at the edge of their land, where the fence leaned tiredly and the weeds had long since taken hold. Crows clustered there, watching. The air smelled of cold hay and old blood from butchering season. He heard nothing at first, just wind threading through the slats like fingers feeling their way. Then the sound came again. Soft, not animal, not wind. He rounded the barn slow, boots crunching frost, and there she was. A woman, lying half-curled beside the fence, her legs awkward, bare feet pale and cracked, the soles cut open like paper. She wore a buckskin dress, once beautiful, now soaked through. Her dark braid was matted and streaked with blood. Her chest rose so faintly it might have been memory. For a moment, he thought she was dead. Then her eyelids fluttered. She blinked. Liam just stood there. She didn't move. Her lips were cracked so deep they bled and scabbed over. Her fingers clenched something small, a pouch beaded in blue and red. She clutched it like a prayer. He swallowed. Do you understand me? No answer. Her gaze found him, unfocused and held. He looked back toward the house. The windows glowed with firelight. His father would be shaving bullets. His mother would be steeping tea. No one would miss him for a few minutes. He knelt. She winced. Not from pain, but something deeper, like shame. I got a blanket. She didn't answer, but her eyes stayed on his. He unfolded it slow. A wind kicked dust from the porch all the way down the fence line. He laid the blanket over her shoulders. She flinched as it touched her, then grew still. She stared at him, not like a person, like something trying to remember what kindness felt like. He looked at her again, really looked. She wasn't old, not yet. Her face was hollowed by starvation, her collarbone sharp as a knife's edge. There were purple welts across her wrists, half covered by torn cloth. Someone had tied her once. He opened his mouth to speak. Nothing came out. A crow cawed overhead. She blinked again, slower. Then her eyes closed. He didn't know if that meant peace or death. The wind picked up, colder now, whispering secrets he didn't understand. He backed away, stood, and returned to the house like a boy waking from a dream. That night, supper was quiet. His father cleaned the rifle twice, muttering about tracks too close to the west ridge. His mother kept her gaze on the stove. Liam didn't speak, but he kept glancing at the door, as if he'd left something outside. He dreamt of breathing that came in gasps, of blue beads scattered across snow. At first light, he returned. She was still there, alive, barely. The blanket steamed slightly, damp from her breath. She hadn't moved much, but the pouch had shifted closer to her chest. He brought her water in a tin cup and half a biscuit he'd hidden in his sleeve. She drank slow, blinking hard with every swallow. He whispered, "You got a name?" She didn't answer, but this time her eyes didn't wander. They fixed on him. She pointed to her chest. "Tula." Her voice was crackbone and smoke. He tried to say it back. "Tu-la," a ghost of a smile. Then she coughed, and blood, dark, stained the blanket. "Don't die," he muttered. She looked past him toward the barn. He helped her up. Inside it smelled like horses. In silence, dust danced in beams of morning light. He made her a bed of straw in the back stall and covered her again. She curled into herself, and her eyes finally closed. Not from pain, but trust. He watched her for a while, then slipped out the side door, ducking low. No one saw him return. That afternoon, his father found him patching the fence with wire. "You see them tracks yesterday?" his father asked. Liam nodded. "You tell me if you see more." He nodded again, but he didn't tell him. That night, the wind shifted. The dogs didn't bark. Not once. But Liam didn't sleep. He sat up in bed, blanket wrapped around his knees. Something in his bones felt hollow, like something had been removed and not yet replaced. He rose, crept to the window. The stars were out, but the prairie didn't look right. He pressed his face to the glass. Nothing moved. Then, in the far dark, he saw them. Not riders, not torches. Just shapes, still and tall, and waiting. He held his breath. The barn was lit inside, just faintly. A candle, or a lantern. Someone else had lit it. He slipped his boots on, heart thudding. Outside, the frost was thicker now, crunching underfoot like brittle bone. He crept around the side of the house, past the chicken shed, toward the barn. The door was ajar. Inside she sat upright, awake. Her braid was untangled, the blanket still draped over her, but her eyes were clear now. "Ancient, you shouldn't be here," she said softly. "You shouldn't be alive," he replied. Something passed between them then. Not words, something quieter. She reached into the pouch and pulled out a carved piece of wood. An animal, he thought. A horse, or maybe a buffalo. She pressed it into his palm. "You saw me," she said. "No one does." He stared down at the figure. A breeze stirred behind them. The horses in the stalls snorted. The candle flickered. She turned her head sharply toward the east window. "What is it?" She didn't answer. But outside, on the ridgeline, something shifted. Liam crossed to the window. There, dark against dark, he counted 3, then 5, then 8 figures, all still, all mounted, none moving, watching the barn. He stepped back, hard in his throat. "Do they want you?" he asked. She didn't move. "They want to see." He turned to her. "See what?" She looked at him then, not like a boy, like a question. "That you gave me the blanket," she said. He swallowed. "I just did what felt right." That's what they're afraid of. He didn't know who she meant. Not yet. But he would. Outside, the line grew. More horses, more shadows. A stillness so deep it pressed against the wood. The prairie was holding its breath, and Liam, 14 and shivering in a barn with a woman who should have died, felt something ancient coil in his chest, like a string pulled tight by hands older than history. He stood by her side, and far across the frost, the ridge filled with watchers waiting for dawn. By morning the frost had gone brittle. It clung like lace to the cornstalks and blanketed the split rail fence in white. Liam moved through it like a ghost. Quiet, not because he had to be, but because it felt like the world required it, like even the trees were holding their breath. Around the barn, he slipped through the side door with a tin pail of warm water, a strip of salt pork folded in paper, and the half loaf of bread he'd hidden beneath his mattress. His boots left small, careful prints that melted the frost only slightly. He was light, like his body hadn't quite settled into itself yet. 14, but more shadow than boy. She hadn't died in the night. Tula, runs with Sky, sat upright in the straw, one hand resting near the blanket he'd given, the other tucked protectively over her pouch. Her skin was shallow, lips cracked to bleeding, but her eyes had found strength, not health, but will. She watched him approach, didn't flinch. That alone felt like a kind of trust. He offered the water first. She took it with both hands and drank in slow, trembling gulps, as if the act of swallowing required more strength than her body had. When he gave her the pork, she only stared. "Eat," he said softly. "You need the salt. You're bleeding inside." She broke a piece off, eyes never leaving his face. Her fingers shook. "You speak more today," he said after a while. "Your voice sounds better." She looked at him. "Not better. Less dying." He smiled, though it didn't reach far. "That's something." A long silence settled. Outside, crows cried over the field. Somewhere distant, a dog barked, sharp and panicked. Then silence again. Liam sat on an overturned feed bucket, watching her eat, slowly, reverently, as if tasting memory. "You got family?" he asked. She nodded once. He didn't press. "My mama's still alive," he added. "Father too, I think. They'd tell me not to help you." She chewed another bite, eyes fixed on her fingers. "You help anyway." He shrugged. "Didn't feel right leaving you." "That's dangerous." "I know." That was all they said for a while. Her cough returned around noon, sharp enough to pull her whole body forward. Liam rose to catch her, steadying her shoulders as she gasped. The blanket slipped, revealing purple-black bruises across her ribs. some older than others. His hands froze. She noticed, pulled the blanket up. "I didn't mean to see," he whispered. "You did. I won't tell anyone." "No need," she said quieter. "They don't care." Her voice wasn't bitter, just factual, like someone who'd already accepted the shape of how the world worked. She coughed again, and her body folded like paper. He poured more water. She drank, but didn't thank him. That wasn't how this was working. By mid-afternoon, he built a small fire in the feed trough. Smoke spiraled gently through the cracks in the roof. She warmed her hands over it, palms as thin as leaves. The smoke clung to her hair. Something about her face began to soften, not from safety, but from remembering what it was. "You're not afraid of me?" she asked, voice rough. Liam shook his head. "I'm afraid of a lot of things. You're not one of them." She watched the flames a while, then whispered, "Even when I get strong?" He thought about it. "Are you planning to hurt me?" "No." "Then I'm still not afraid." She didn't speak again, but he noticed the way her fingers curled tighter around the blanket, as if that mattered more than anything she could say. The barn grew warm with the fire, but dusk came fast. The light outside bent gold through the slats, and the wind changed again. Distant hoofbeats echoed faintly against the ridges, and Liam's skin prickled. He moved to the door, cracked it just wide enough to peer out. There was no one, but the silence was thick now, like the prairie was waiting for something. Inside, she had started singing. Not loud, a hush song, lilting and low, the kind used to call spirits or cradle children. Liam didn't understand the words, but the sound threaded into his bones and sat there. It reminded him of being 4 and hiding beneath his mother's quilt during a storm. He turned back. "What does it mean?" She didn't look up. "It's for the dead. And the lost." "You're not dead." She paused. "Then maybe just lost." He sat beside her. The fire hissed once. "You said your name yesterday. Tula. What does it mean?" Her eyes gleamed in the firelight. "It means, she who walks where sky breaks." "That's pretty." "It was my grandmother's name." Liam nodded. He didn't know what to say after that. The sound of her voice lingered long after the singing stopped. Night fell heavy, stars sharp as nails overhead. The moon was a perfect curve of white, watchful, pale, judging. He left her with more bread, then crept back to the house, slipping in through the cellar. His boots left faint marks on the kitchen stone. He stopped long enough to listen. Upstairs, his parents argued in low voices, about horses, about strangers, about tribes moving east, about signs. His father's voice was clipped. His mother sounded tired. They didn't know what was sitting in their barn, breathing and warming and healing on their boy's compassion. He went to bed fully dressed, pulled the second blanket over himself and stared at the ceiling. The stars outside his window seemed brighter, or maybe he was just seeing clearer. Sleep came in fits. When he woke just past midnight, the fire had long gone out, but the wind carried something different now. Voices, not words, not English. He sat up fast, heart hammering. At the window, he saw nothing, but the dogs weren't barking. And when the dogs didn't bark, that meant someone was already here. He dressed, grabbed he carried a small lantern and slipped outside. The barn stood still under the stars, black and unmoving. His breath came in white clouds. The trees behind the barn rustled faintly, not wind. He reached the door. Inside, she stood on her feet, hair falling down her back, cheeks flushed with blood again, not fully healed but not dying either. She turned when he entered, said nothing. "How long have you been standing?" he asked. She didn't answer. He stepped forward, lantern swinging low. Her breath fogged in the cold. The blanket trailed behind her, dragging straw. She looked stronger, but something had shifted in her gaze. "Is someone out there?" he asked. She nodded, slow. "Friends? Maybe." He tensed. "Should I be scared?" "Not yet." Outside, something snapped. A twig, a hoof. She moved closer to him. "You should tell them," she whispered. "Your family. They deserve to know. They won't listen. They'll just shoot." She looked toward the far wall, toward the ridge, her eyes filled with something he couldn't name. Not fear, not sorrow. Something older. "They're waiting," she said. "For what?" She turned to him fully now. "To see if you're like them." "I'm not. You gave me your blanket." He swallowed. "You looked cold." That's not what they saw. She stepped toward the barn door. "Liam," she said softly. He blinked. "How do you know my name?" She didn't smile. "You told it in your silence." And then she opened the door. And outside, on the hill, under the cold fire of stars, the ridge was full. Dozens, maybe more. Mounted. Silent. Unmoving. All of them watching a barn at sunrise. The wind bent the grass flat, and the ridge above the Carter homestead stood dark with horses. They made no sound. No war cries. No drums. Not even a banner. Just figures, still as stone, outlined by a morning sun, too pale to warm. Liam stood behind the barn door, his heart tapping like rain on a tin roof. His breath fogged the air in front of him as he counted. First 10, then 20, then too many to keep track of. Their silhouettes stretched back along the ridge like shadows, waiting to become men. She said nothing. Beside him, Tula, Runs with Sky, stood wrapped in the patchwork blanket, hair loose, face expressionless. She looked out at them like one who had died and been forgotten, only to be remembered all at once by the sky itself. He whispered, "Who are they?" She did not answer. The barn was quiet. The horses inside shifted anxiously, hooves stirring straw. One let out a low, throaty whinny. Liam turned to her again. "Are they here for you?" Her jaw clenched, but her voice was even. "They are here to see what lives." It didn't make sense yet, but Liam was beginning to understand that not everything in the West came with clean answers. Some things just arrived in silence and waited to be seen. By breakfast, the town had noticed. Dust rose from the far road as riders bolted from homesteads. The church bell rang, not for prayer, but as a warning. And still, the ridge did not move. The warriors sat their horses like trees watching. Only their braids stirred in the wind. Jedediah Carter stood on the front porch with a loaded rifle and narrowed eyes. "They ain't moved a muscle," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "That many Comanche ain't rode out for peace in my lifetime." Maribel stood behind him, arms crossed tight, eyes darting toward the barn. "Maybe they're looking for someone," she said. Jed's face hardened. "A settler?" "Doubtful. They came for blood." But even as he spoke it, there was doubt in his voice. This was not how war began. Not this quiet. Liam remained by the barn all morning. He chopped wood that didn't need chopping. He checked horses that didn't need checking. Anything to stay close. Every hour he looked up. They were still there. No closer. No farther. Just waiting. By mid-morning, a single figure detached from the line and began to ride down the ridge, slow as molasses, without haste or fear. His horse was pale and scarred. The rider wore no war paint, only a weathered buffalo hide cloak. His hair was long, streaked with grey, and his expression was carved from riverstone. Tula saw him and inhaled sharply. The sound wasn't fear. It was recognition. Liam asked, "Do you know him?" She nodded. Blue Antler. He'd heard the name before. Whispered by traitors, feared in saloons. A chief whose age made him dangerous, not because he fought, but because he remembered everything that had ever been done to his people. The old man rode up to the front gate and dismounted without a word. Jedediah stepped forward, rifle raised. "You got business here, Chief?" Blue Antler didn't flinch. He looked past him toward the barn. "I was told," he said, voice low and clear, "that one of our blood lay dying on this land, and that a settler's son gave her his only blanket." Jed said nothing at first. The wind tugged at his coat. "My son's been nowhere near your kind," he said stiffly. The old man's eyes didn't blink. "Are you sure of that?" Maribel stepped forward. "If he did it out of pity." Blue Antler turned to her. It wasn't pity. It was honor. A silence fell, heavy between them. From the barn's shadow, Liam watched the moment swell. Blue Antler finally said, "We ask only to see her." Jedediah didn't lower the rifle. "And if we say no?" The chief didn't threaten. He simply looked up the ridge. Liam followed his gaze. Hundreds of warriors sat waiting. Blue Antler turned back. "We are not here for war, unless war is given to us." Liam stepped. He stepped forward. He left the barn quietly, hands open, walking slow as the sun. His boots crunched dry earth with each step. Runs with Sky stayed behind, watching. Liam stopped between his father and the old chief. Jed's voice hissed, "Get back in the house, boy." But Liam didn't move. He turned to Blue Antler. "She's alive. Barely. But I gave her the blanket." Jed's face went red. "Liam, she was going to die," he said louder now. "And she didn't. Not yet." Blue Antler looked at him, long and slow. "What made you help her?" Liam's voice trembled. "Because she looked like someone who'd been seen last by wolves." The chief nodded once. That seemed enough. Jedediah stepped back, uncertain now. Blue Antler did not smile, but his voice softened. "You were not born into this land, but you belong to it more than some who think they own it." Liam swallowed hard. "I didn't want to start anything." The chief raised a hand. "You started peace." Then, to everyone's surprise, he stepped away from his horse and knelt, slow, deliberate. And high above, on the ridge, the other warriors dismounted one by one. In silence, hundreds of Comanche bent to their knees. The sound of it, the faint shuffle of boots and bone and prayer, rolled like thunder down the valley. Jedediah lowered his rifle. His hands shook. Maribel's eyes filled. Liam just stood there, breath caught. Then Runs with Sky stepped forward out of the barn. Slowly. Her body was wrapped in the patched settler blanket. Her face still gaunt, her legs trembling. But she walked, alone, toward the kneeling men, toward Blue Antler. And she fell, not from weakness, but into his arms. He caught her, held her for a long moment, then stood, lifting her with ease, and turned back to the line. He didn't speak again. He didn't need to. Runs with Sky had come home. And yet, she did not leave. Not yet. She turned her face once more toward Liam, and in that quiet second, as the wind whipped her hair and the blanket danced behind her, she smiled. Soft, almost unseen. But it rooted itself in Liam like a tree. Blue Antler turned his horse, and slowly the entire ridge began to move. Silent, graceful. Hundreds of horses turning back into the horizon. By dusk, the land was empty again. But Liam knew something had changed. Inside the barn, a single carved animal had been left in the straw. Not the one she carried. A new one. An eagle. Its wings spread wide. He picked it up, hands trembling. The weight of it was small, but something in it felt eternal. Snow came 2 days after the riders vanished. Not a storm. Not yet. Just a dusting. Quiet and steady, turning the prairie silver under a pewter sky. The wind had changed direction again, and with it, something in the house shifted too. Jedediah spoke less. Maribel stirred the stew longer than needed. Even the dogs barked with less bite. Liam hadn't spoken of what he saw. Not the kneeling warriors, not the wooden eagle, not the way she had smiled before turning. That was his, and it glowed inside him like a lantern kept under a blanket. But she had not left that morning. She was still in the barn. She had risen early and stood by the stall window, her breath fogging the wooden frame. The patched blanket hung from her shoulders, her face turned toward the hills that now held no one. She looked smaller somehow, tired, in a different way. Liam watched from the loft ladder. He hadn't meant to spy, but something about her stillness held him. "You should go home," she said without turning. "Your mother will want your hands at the table." He climbed down anyway. "You slept enough. You should eat." She nodded, but didn't move. He handed her the tin of dried apples he'd kept wrapped in cloth. She took one, holding it like it was foreign. "You going to stay long?" he asked, then immediately regretted it. Not because he didn't want her to, but because he didn't know if he had the right to hope. She looked at him now. Her eyes held something unreadable. "I shouldn't have stayed at all." He shifted. "They came for you." "No. They came for what I might have been. You were theirs." She shook her head. "I was a burden, dead weight. They thought I was gone. I don't belong to anyone now." "You do," he said before thinking. Her silence bloomed between them. She returned her gaze to the snowy field. "Your kindness is too large for your frame, Liam." He flushed. "It's just a blanket." "No," she said. "It was the first warmth I'd felt in months." He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Later, she swept the barn floor. It wasn't expected. She didn't ask permission. She just did it. And when Maribel came with a bucket of soup, the woman took it without thanks, but not without grace. That night, Liam's father said little. He stirred the fire and looked out the window long, as if waiting for someone who hadn't arrived. "She'll leave soon," he muttered. though no one had asked. Maribel nodded, not looking up. Let her choose when. She don't belong here. No one does, Jed. Not really. And with that, the conversation ended. By the next morning she was gone, the blanket folded, the pouch missing. Her tracks led toward the west ridge. Each step pressed soft into the snow, vanishing by midday. Liam found the folded blanket inside the barn, still warm. His breath caught when he touched it. She hadn't said goodbye. That was what hurt. Not the going. The absence of a single word. He told no one. Let his father believe the world had righted itself. But Liam returned to the barn 3 times that day. Once to check the horses, once to check the blanket, once to check his own heart. Each time, something inside felt emptier. That evening, as the snow picked up and the clouds thickened, Liam sat on the front porch in silence. His hands were tucked under his arms. The air bit his ears. The world felt hushed. "She meant something to you," Maribel said, stepping beside him. He looked up. "I don't know what she was. The kind of woman that makes a boy wonder what life could be like, with someone watching him the way she did." He blinked. "She didn't watch me." "She did, but softly, like someone seeing a memory too fragile to touch." He didn't answer. "She'll remember you, Liam. That's more than most folk ever get that night." He dreamed of smoke curling through tall trees, of a river running red, of a voice singing words he didn't understand. He woke before dawn, and when he opened the barn door the next morning, she was there, curled on the straw again, face pale, shoulders shaking with a fever that hadn't been there before. He ran to her side, panic catching in his throat. Her skin burned. "I didn't mean to come back," she rasped. "But the cold." He covered her with the blanket and yelled for his mother. Within minutes, the house came alive. Maribel helped him carry her inside. Jedediah said nothing, just stepped aside. They laid her on the cot in the parlor, and for 3 days she drifted in and out of fever dreams. Liam sat by her side, wiping her brow with cool cloths, whispering nonsense to fill the silences. "She was halfway to the ridge," Maribel murmured, turning back toward the barn. "Why?" "Something stronger than cold," she said. "Something unfinished." On the 4th day, the fever broke. She opened her eyes to the soft yellow of lamplight and found Liam sleeping beside her cot, knees drawn to his chest, breath slow. She whispered his name. His eyes opened. "You're back." "I tried to leave," she said. "I know, but I kept seeing the way you looked at me, like I wasn't broken." "You weren't." "I was." Liam sat up. "Not to me." She reached for his hand. He didn't flinch. Her fingers were weak but warmer now. "You shouldn't have followed me." "I didn't," he said. "I waited." Her breath caught. "Why?" she asked. He shrugged. "Because sometimes people don't know they're allowed to stay." She said nothing. Maribel brought broth and set it gently on the table. She didn't interrupt, just touched the woman's shoulder and left the room. Outside, the snow had deepened. The world had grown white and soft, like a wound wrapped in cotton. "You shouldn't have come back," Jed said that evening, standing by the window. "But I'm glad you did." Runs with Sky looked at him, surprised. "You remind me of a woman I knew," he said. "One who didn't flinch when the world turned cruel." She didn't answer. He nodded once and left. That night Liam helped her sit by the fire. She watched the flames dance like stories told without words. Her eyes followed each flicker. "I thought I had no place," she whispered, "but I think I had just never been invited." Liam looked at her. "You were never not welcome. No one ever told me that before." "I'm telling you now." She turned to him. "Do you know what they called me when I was little?" He shook his head. "Little sky ghost," she said. "I used to wander off. Said the clouds whispered things to me. Do they still? Not as much. Maybe they're waiting for you to listen again." She smiled faintly. "Maybe." The fire popped. And then, as the embers dimmed and the snow fell steady outside, she turned toward him fully. "I think I need to leave again." He froze. "Why?" "Because it's too much." "Too much what?" "Being cared for." He said nothing. She leaned forward. "I don't know how to be loved. I know how to survive, but love, it's loud and soft, and it hurts." Liam stood. "Then stay until it stops hurting." Tears welled in her eyes, unfallen. "I can't promise that." "You don't have to," he said. Just don't go before you're ready." She reached for his hand again. This time she held it longer. The snowstorm built through the night. By morning the drifts came up to the windows. The house became a cocoon, 3 souls moving around each other with quiet grace. For the first time, she laughed, just once, at a story Maribel told about Liam stealing jam as a toddler, and for the first time, Liam's father looked at her and didn't look away. Later that afternoon, she stood at the edge of the porch, blanket wrapped around her, eyes toward the now empty hills. She breathed deep. "I was going to leave again today," she said. Liam stood beside her. "Why didn't you?" She looked up at him. "Because I remembered your voice when you said my name." He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. The snow stopped just before sunset, and across the plain, far and faint, a single rider appeared, dark against the white, riding slow toward the barn. The rider came alone. No war paint, no torch, no banner. Just a dark figure riding slowly across snow that swallowed hoofbeats and hushed the world. Liam stood beside the porch rail, his breath clouding the air, hands curled against the cold. Behind him, Runs with Sky stepped out into the pale light, the quilted blanket around her shoulders and her hair loose against her back. Her eyes narrowed, not in fear but something deeper, recognition perhaps, or resignation. Jedediah emerged from the house with a rifle under one arm, but he didn't raise it. The way the rider moved told them all he wasn't there for violence. The horse stopped just before the fence line, steam rising from its nostrils. The man dismounted. He wasn't young. Scars marked his cheeks. His coat was wolfskin, too fine to be settler-made. He had the look of someone who had ridden far, not in distance but in years. A man hunted by choices. He looked at Liam, then at the woman beside him. "Liam," Runs with Sky said quietly, her voice tighter than it had been since she arrived. "Go inside." He didn't move. The man stepped closer, his boots crunching snow. His gaze flicked toward Jedediah, who met it evenly. "I didn't come to fight." "Good," Jedediah said. "You wouldn't win." The man nodded, then turned to her again. "You left without finishing." "I wasn't yours to finish," she replied. "You vanished after the treaty. I ran after the bruises." His jaw tensed. "That was not what I meant." "But it's what you did." Liam looked between them, breath shallow. He could feel the storm beneath the quiet. The barn door stood behind them, slightly ajar, and in that moment, it felt less like a building and more like a witness. The man lowered his voice. "You were promised to me." Runs with Sky nodded. "By men who never asked if I agreed. You wore the red necklace. Because I was a child. Because I didn't know it meant I was owned. I never touched you in hate. You touched me in expectation," she said, fire flickering under each word. "That's a slower kind of death." Jedediah shifted behind Liam. "This is settler land. You said your piece. Leave now." The man's hand twitched near his belt, not for a weapon, but for the habit of reaching when cornered. He looked at Liam. "Is this the boy?" "I am," Liam said quietly. The man studied him. "You gave her a blanket." "I gave her warmth." The man's lip curled. "She belonged to us." Liam stepped forward. "No, she belonged to no one. And maybe that's why you lost her." There was no shout, no raised voices, just cold breath, snow crunch, and the weight of too many years between the three of them. Runs with Sky didn't look away. She stood taller now. "You came all this way," she said softly, "and still you don't see me." The man exhaled. "They'll come for you." "Let them. You'll bring war." "No," she said. "You will, because you cannot stand to see a woman choose peace where she was meant to bleed." He stepped back like she'd struck him. His eyes burned for a second, and then he turned, swung into the saddle, and rode off without another word. The silence he left behind was heavier than gunfire. That night, no one spoke of what had happened. But something had broken loose. A thread pulled, a knot untied. At dawn, the barn door swung wide again. Not from wind, but from movement. People. The first came on foot. A woman from town, hat in hand, eyes wary. Then a boy younger than Liam, holding a jar of canned pears. By midday, 5 more. By sunset, a dozen. They didn't say much, just looked at Runs with Sky like a story they'd heard once but never believed. Some offered gifts, some just sat. They didn't come to accuse, they came to see. Liam watched it all unfold with a strange ache inside him. Not pain, just a shift, a door opening. That night she sat beside him in the barn, firelight warming her cheek. "You saved me twice," she said. "No, just once. The rest was you." She looked at him. "I almost left before I felt anything. It scared me." He nodded. "Me too. I've never been seen without being used. Now you have." She smiled faintly. "I still don't know where to go." He looked around the barn. The roof leaked. The walls creaked. But the place held memory now, both weight and lightness. "Then stay until you do." She leaned against the post. "What about your family?" "They're already changing." Indeed, Jedediah had started leaving his rifle on the mantel. Maribel no longer looked through the curtains when a shadow passed. The dogs barked again, just not as often. One morning, 3 days later, the same ridge that had once held warriors now held wagons. 17 of them. Comanche. Not for war, for something else. A council. Blue Antler stepped from the lead wagon. When he saw Liam, he smiled, in the way only men who have buried sons and forgiven enemies can. He approached the barn, stopped at the threshold. "She walks again." "She does." Blue Antler nodded. "And you?" Liam hesitated. "I think I've changed." The old man's eyes narrowed in gentle scrutiny. "Then you're becoming something worth remembering." Inside the barn, Runs with Sky stepped forward. She bowed her head to the chief, but not low, not like one beneath, like one returning. They spoke in words Liam didn't know, but he watched their hands move, their eyes soften. And then Blue Antler turned to him. "The Comanche wish to make peace with this land, with this house. Not because we trusted, but because of what was done here." Liam looked down. "I didn't do much. You lit a fire in the snow." The council lasted hours. Not everyone agreed, but when the sun set, there were fewer walls between them. That evening, as smoke curled from every chimney and frost kissed every window, Runs with Sky stood alone inside the barn again, looking toward the empty hills. Liam entered quietly. "They said I can go back," she whispered. He swallowed. "Do you want to?" "I don't know. You don't have to decide tonight." She turned. "I never thought I'd get to choose." He nodded. "You gave me that." He stepped closer. "So stay, or go, but do it because it's yours now." She touched his cheek with calloused fingers. "And if I stayed? Then I'd make sure the roof stops leaking." She laughed. It was the first time he'd ever heard her laugh with her whole body. That night, Jedediah built a new gate at the barn, with Liam beside him. Maribel sewed a second blanket. The world did not shift all at once, but inside that barn, something had settled into place. Not perfect, but right. When Liam rose before dawn the next morning, the wind was calm. The fire was still glowing, and beside it, she sat waiting, not to run, but to begin. A year later, the barn would be rebuilt in cedar. A plaque hung inside where the wind paused to listen. But for now, it was just a boy, a woman, and the warm hush of something true. And far across the hills, where hooves had once threatened fire,